The day started like any other in the quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people trimmed their lawns on Saturdays, where kids rode bikes up and down the sidewalks, and where the loudest sound at night was the hum of a passing car. For Marcus, a 40-year-old Army veteran who had served 2 tours overseas, the neighborhood had become his sanctuary. He had fought too hard and seen too much chaos to not cherish the peace he had now. Inside his modest home, sunlight spilled across the kitchen table where he sat sipping coffee, flipping through news on his tablet, the kind of morning ritual that reminded him he had made it back home safe. He had his home, his freedom, and his firearms safely locked in his gun cabinet, a collection he treated with respect, discipline, and care. It was around mid-morning when he heard the sound of tires crunching slowly over gravel. He looked up through the blinds and saw a black SUV rolling into his driveway. It wasn't marked like a police car, no flashing lights, no decals, but 2 men stepped out dressed in dark tactical vests with bold letters across the front. His eyes narrowed. The lettering read Community Enforcement. Marcus frowned. That wasn't law enforcement. That wasn't even security he recognized. The 2 men adjusted their gear like actors, rehearsing a role they weren't familiar with. One had sunglasses and a shaved head, trying to look authoritative, while the other carried a clipboard tucked under his arm. They moved with forced confidence, but their posture gave them away. Marcus had trained enough recruits during his service to recognize when men were pretending to be something they weren't. He opened his door and stepped out onto the porch, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the driveway. The men paused for a moment, then walked closer. Mr. Johnson, the one with the clipboard, asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch, his eyes scanning for details, the cheap stitching on their vests, the lack of radios, the absence of body cams. Even their boots weren't regulation. Everything screamed costume. "Who's asking?" Marcus finally said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "We're with the Homeowners Association Enforcement Division." The man said, flipping the clipboard around like it was some kind of badge. "We've received reports that you have firearms on the property. We're here to do a compliance check." Marcus let out a short laugh, not the amused kind, but the kind that made the men shift uncomfortably. "Compliance check," he repeated. "Since when does the HOA send armed men to check people's homes?" "It's part of the new safety initiative," the shaved head one said, trying to sound firm. "All firearms need to be inspected to make sure they're properly registered and stored." "Let me guess," Marcus said, crossing his arms. "You'll need me to hand them over, right, for the safety of the neighborhood." The man with the sunglasses nodded slightly, as if Marcus had already admitted guilt. "That's correct, sir. If you just cooperate, this will be quick." Marcus didn't move. His mind, sharpened by years of training, was already running through possibilities. Fake cops, impostors, possibly armed, likely testing his response. He felt his pulse slow, not quicken the way it always did when his military instincts took over. "You boys picked the wrong house," Marcus said quietly. The impostors stiffened, but Marcus didn't raise his voice. He spoke with calm authority, like a commander briefing his unit. He knew one thing: men like these thrived on intimidation, but once they realized their bluff was called, their mask cracked. "You're not law enforcement," Marcus continued. "You don't have a warrant, and you sure as hell aren't coming into my home." Clipboard guy tried again, his tone shifting to fake reassurance. "Sir, refusing to comply could result in fines or even arrest. We're authorized." Marcus cut him off. "Authorized by who? The HOA president? Last I checked, the HOA can fine me for leaving my trash can out too long, but they can't send wannabe SWAT officers to seize my private property." There was a tense pause. Her neighbors a few houses down had started peeking out from their windows, curious about the black SUV and the confrontation unfolding in Marcus's driveway. Marcus noticed, but kept his focus locked on the two men in front of him. Then the one with sunglasses shifted his hand toward his vest pocket. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He didn't miss a thing. In less than a second, his stance changed. He didn't lunge, didn't escalate, but his entire posture screamed readiness. The men noticed it instantly. The calm veteran on the porch now looked like someone who could dismantle them in seconds. "You thinking about reaching for something?" Marcus asked softly, his tone dangerous. Sunglasses froze, his hand hovering, then slowly pulled away, as if burned. Marcus took a slow step forward, voice steady. "Let me explain something. I've dealt with warlords who thought they could intimidate people into giving up what's theirs. I've stared down men who carried real weapons and had real authority to kill. You think you can play dress-up and scare me into handing over my rights? Not today." Clipboard guy swallowed hard. He tried to regain ground. "Sir, if you don't cooperate, we'll have to escalate this situation." Marcus smirked. "Escalate, do it. Call whoever you think will back you up. But I promise you, the second you step foot past this porch, you'll wish you hadn't." Inside, his phone buzzed on the table. Marcus knew his security cameras were already recording everything. Every word, every gesture, every false claim these men made was being captured in high definition. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said finally. "You're going to get back in that SUV. You're going to drive out of my driveway. And if you're lucky, I won't call the sheriff and have you arrested for impersonating officers." The two men exchanged a look. For the first time, their confidence wavered. Sunglasses shifted his weight nervously, and Clipboard Guy's throat bobbed as he swallowed. But instead of leaving, Clipboard Guy took a gamble. He stepped closer. "Sir, we really don't want this to get ugly. Just cooperate, hand over the firearms, and we'll be on our way." Marcus's eyes hardened. He stepped down from the porch slowly, one boot at a time, until he was standing face with them in the driveway. His presence loomed large, and his voice dropped low enough for only them to hear. "You ever hear of military protocol?" he asked. The men frowned, not answering. Marcus leaned in just slightly. "It means when things go south, I don't panic, I don't stutter, I execute. I've been trained to assess threats, neutralize them, and make sure I live to see another day. So if you think you can bluff me, you've already lost." For a moment, neither of the impostors moved. The neighborhood seemed frozen, the air thick with tension. A dog barked somewhere down the street, but even that sound seemed muffled. Marcus took another step forward, his eyes locked like crosshairs. "Now leave, before I show you exactly what protocol looks like." The two men hesitated, their false bravado crumbling with each passing second. They had expected compliance, maybe fear, maybe confusion. They hadn't expected a man who saw through them instantly, who radiated a calm readiness they couldn't match. Clipboard Guy finally broke the silence. "Let's go," he muttered. Sunglasses looked like he wanted to argue, but the set of Marcus's jaw convinced him otherwise. They turned, walked briskly back to the SUV, and climbed in without another word. Marcus stood in his driveway, watching as the black vehicle backed out and rolled down the street. Only when it was gone did he let out a long breath, though his muscles never fully relaxed. His instincts told him this wasn't over. People like that didn't just vanish. They tested, they probed, they came back. He walked back into his house, shut the door behind him, and locked it. His phone was still buzzing with alerts from his security system. He replayed the footage, making sure every second of that encounter was saved. Then he sat down, opened a notepad, and began documenting everything: times, descriptions, words used. Military protocol meant preparation, and Marcus wasn't about to leave anything to chance. As he typed, his mind replayed the confrontation. Who were those men really? Scammers, criminals, or part of something bigger? Testing how far they could push before someone pushed back. Whatever the case, they had picked the wrong man to intimidate. Marcus had fought for freedom, bled for it, and buried brothers who never came home to enjoy it. No one, not some fake HOA cops, not anyone, was going to take that from him. Marcus hardly slept that night. He had spent hours replaying the footage from his cameras, making copies to a secure drive, uploading backups to cloud storage, and sending a copy to an old Army buddy who now worked in law enforcement. His training told him one thing above all else: never assume the first encounter was the last. If someone made a move that bold in broad daylight, they had a reason, and if they failed the first time, they would regroup, reassess, and come back stronger. So, when dawn broke, Marcus was already awake, dressed, and walking the perimeter of his property like he had done on patrols in dusty foreign villages. His boots crunched softly over dew-soaked grass, his eyes scanning for signs out of place. Nothing yet, but his gut told him the storm wasn't over. By mid-morning, as he sat at the kitchen table with another mug of black coffee, his prediction came true. He caught sight of the same black SUV creeping back into the neighborhood, only this time it didn't come alone. A second vehicle followed, an older white van with no markings, windows darkly tinted. The hairs on Marcus's neck rose. He set his mug down and stood, moving with quiet efficiency. He pulled his phone from his pocket, opened his secure app, and pinged his Army buddy. They're back. 2 vehicles. Then he went to his storage closet, opened the heavy safe, and checked his gear. Not just his firearms, but the other essentials: tactical flashlight, medical kit, encrypted comms device he still kept from his service days. Everything was laid out with precision. When he stepped out onto the porch this time, he was ready. The SUV parked in his driveway again, but the van stayed a little further down the street, engine idling. The same 2 men climbed out of the SUV, but they weren't alone. 2 more figures stepped out of the van, bigger men, bulkier, with masks pulled down around their chins. They didn't even bother with the HOA charade this time. Clipboard Guy tried to wear his old fake smile, but his voice carried less confidence than before. "Mr. Johnson, we're here to finish what we started yesterday. Things will go smoother if you don't resist." Marcus didn't move from his porch. His arms were crossed again, his stance firm. "Yesterday you came dressed like clowns pretending to be authority. Today you bring backup and a mystery van. Tell me, when exactly do you stop pretending and admit what you really are?" Sunglasses sneered. "We don't have time for games. We know what you have inside. Hand it over." Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying their formation. The 2 newcomers weren't speaking, but their body language screamed aggression. They shifted on their feet like men waiting for a signal. Marcus recognized it instantly. They were preparing to move in, to flank him, to corner him. He let out a slow breath, centering himself. In his mind, he walked through the protocols drilled into him during countless operations overseas. Step 1, control the space. Step 2, control the tempo. Step 3, escalate only on his terms. You think because you outnumber me, you've won. Marcus said calmly, "You've forgotten the most important thing, discipline. You don't have it. You don't even know what it looks like, but I do." Clipboard Guy snapped his fingers. The 2 bulkier men started forward. Marcus raised one hand, palm out, his voice sharp and commanding. "Stop." The word cracked like a gunshot. For a moment, even they froze. Marcus's tone wasn't pleading or angry. It was authoritative, the kind of tone soldiers obey without question. "Let me be clear," Marcus continued, his eyes sweeping across all four of them. "If you step 1 foot onto this porch, you are trespassing with intent to harm, and I will treat you accordingly. My cameras are live, streaming to multiple secure servers. Law enforcement already has your faces, your vehicles, and your license plates. The second you cross that line, you'll be wanted men." The impostors glanced at one another. Doubt flickered. Marcus pressed the advantage. "You came here thinking I was just another homeowner, someone you could bully into compliance. What you didn't know is that I've spent half my life preparing for men like you. Overseas, I learned what happens when bullies with guns try to strip people of their rights. I fought against it then, and I'll fight against it now. You think you're wolves, but to me, you're just sheep in costumes." Sunglasses cursed under his breath. "This guy thinks he's a hero." "No," Marcus replied, his voice dropping lower. "I think I'm a man who's not afraid of you." The tension thickened. One of the bigger men finally stepped forward, ignoring the warning. His boots hit the bottom step of Marcus's porch. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Without hesitation, he shifted his stance, 1 foot back, his entire body coiled like a spring. He didn't reach for a weapon, not yet, but his readiness was undeniable. Another step. Marcus warned, his voice like gravel. "Go ahead, test me." The big man hesitated, his bravado faltering under the unwavering stare of someone who had faced death before and didn't flinch. He looked back at Sunglasses, waiting for direction. Clipboard Guy's voice cracked slightly. This isn't worth it. Let's regroup." But Sunglasses wasn't ready to back down. His pride was on the line, his ego too bruised to retreat again. He pulled a small object from his vest, a cheap-looking badge he flashed like it meant something. "A last chance, Johnson. You either comply now or—" Marcus's laugh cut him off, low and dangerous. "That's not a badge. That's a toy. And you just sealed your fate." At that exact moment, the faint wail of sirens carried through the neighborhood. The impostors stiffened, their heads snapping toward the sound. Marcus didn't even have to look. His buddy had kept his word. Local deputies were already on their way. "You hear that?" Marcus said evenly. "That's the sound of real law enforcement. They'll be here in less than a minute. Now you have a choice: run or get arrested for impersonating officers." Panic finally broke through their act. Clipboard Guy grabbed Sunglasses by the arm, yanking him back. The two bulky men muttered curses, retreating toward the van. Doors slammed, engines roared, and within seconds both vehicles screeched down the street, vanishing around the corner just as a pair of sheriff's cruisers pulled in from the opposite end. Marcus remained on his porch, arms still folded, his heartbeat steady. When the deputies pulled up, he calmly walked down to meet them, handing over the footage on a USB stick he had already prepared. The deputies shook their heads as they watched the clips. "You handled this better than most, sir. Whoever they are, they've done this before, but they didn't count on someone like you." Marcus nodded slowly. "They'll be back. People like that don't just disappear. But next time, I'll be ready." Inside, after the deputies left, Marcus closed his door and leaned against it for a long moment. The silence pressed in heavy, but his mind was anything but quiet. He knew the impostors weren't finished. They had tested him twice now, each time escalating. Whatever they were after, they wanted it badly enough to risk exposure, and that meant the real battle hadn't even begun. As night fell, Marcus sat in the glow of his security monitors, eyes sharp, waiting. Military protocol wasn't just about reacting. It was about preparation, endurance, and outlasting the enemy, and Marcus was prepared to go the distance. Marcus knew they weren't finished. The deputies had promised to increase patrols in the area, but criminals like these didn't operate under schedules or play by rules. They waited, they studied, and when they thought the heat had cooled down, they struck again. That was why Marcus didn't let his guard drop. He followed his old soldier's habits. He checked locks every night, kept his cameras running, logged suspicious vehicles in a notebook, and ran through drills in his head like he was back in a forward operating base. 3 days passed without a sign of the black SUV or the van. Neighbors started to relax, chalking it up to a weird incident that probably wouldn't happen again. But Marcus didn't relax. He sharpened his routines, got his gear ready, and made sure he could move from zero to combat, ready in seconds. He was right to prepare. It was just past midnight on the 4th day when the dogs started barking. Not one or two, but several, all down the street, their frantic yelps echoing through the still night. Marcus was instantly awake. He slid silently from bed, pulled on his boots, and moved to the window. At first, all he saw was darkness. Then, the faint glint of headlights cutting off suddenly, like a car had parked with deliberate stealth. He didn't panic. He moved methodically. He checked the live feeds from his security cameras. There it was, the van again, this time without the SUV. Its lights off, engine faintly ticking as it cooled. He zoomed in. 4 men inside, their outlines sharp against the glow of streetlights. They were sitting too still, too focused. Waiting, Marcus's jaw tightened. They weren't going to knock this time. They weren't coming for a bluff. They were coming to force their way in. He moved through his house with calm efficiency, the way he had cleared rooms overseas. He picked up his rifle, checked the chamber, and set it near the door, but didn't shoulder it yet. He wasn't looking for a gunfight. Military protocol meant control, not chaos. He activated the floodlights outside with a quick tap on his phone, bathing the driveway and yard in blinding white. The men in the van reacted instantly, ducking down. A few seconds later, the side door slid open and they spilled out, this time fully masked, weapons in hand. They weren't toys now. They carried shotguns and pistols, moving fast and low toward his house. Marcus felt the old switch inside him flip, the same switch that had saved him countless times overseas, fear drained out, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He moved to his prepositioned cover near the front window, his own weapon trained not to fire blindly but to control space. He had already positioned warning signs outside, armed security on premises. All activities recorded. They ignored them. That told him everything he needed to know. The first masked man reached his porch and tried the door. Locked, he yanked harder. Another moved toward a side window. Marcus's voice boomed out from inside, steady and commanding. "This property is armed and under surveillance. You are trespassing. Leave immediately." The men didn't back down. One of them raised a shotgun, pointing it toward the door. Marcus didn't hesitate. He slammed the steel bar lock into place across the doorframe and moved back into deeper cover. His cameras caught everything, transmitting live to his off-site storage. Then he initiated the next phase of protocol, disruption. He tapped a button on his phone, and sirens hidden in his yard roared to life. Strobe lights mounted under his eaves began flashing, disorienting the attackers. The men cursed, stumbling, suddenly uncertain in the chaos of noise and blinding light. Marcus used their hesitation. He stepped just into view at an upstairs window, weapon aimed but finger disciplined. His voice cut through the sirens like a blade. "You have 10 seconds to drop your weapons and run, or this becomes a battlefield." The men froze, looking up, caught in the harsh white glare of his floodlights. For a split second, Marcus saw it, the crack in their bravado. the flicker of doubt. He pressed harder. "I've fought trained militias better armed than you. I've survived ambushes you can't imagine. If you cross that line, you won't leave here standing." One of them shouted, "He's bluffing," and fired a shotgun blast into the door. The wood splintered, but the reinforced steel core held. The sound echoed down the street, waking neighbors, lights flicking on in houses all around. Now the entire block was watching. Marcus didn't flinch. He moved with purpose, slid into his firing position, and aimed carefully at the concrete near the attacker's feet. He squeezed off a single shot, the round cracking like thunder. Dust exploded at the man's boots, sending him stumbling backward in shock. That, Marcus shouted, was a warning. The next one won't be. The men faltered. They hadn't expected resistance like this. They had counted on intimidation, on fear, on compliance. Instead, they were caught in a carefully orchestrated defense by a man who had spent years perfecting the art of survival. Then the distant wail of sirens grew louder again, real ones this time. Someone had called 911 after the shotgun blast, maybe a neighbor, maybe one of Marcus's automated alerts. Either way, backup was closing in fast. The masked men panicked. They exchanged frantic shouts, retreating toward the van. One fired another wild shot toward the house, the round sparking harmlessly against reinforced siding. Marcus didn't fire back. He didn't need to. His objective wasn't to kill. It was to repel, to survive, to expose them. Within seconds, the van roared to life, tires squealing as it tore away from the curb. Marcus tracked them through his cameras, every frame captured, every plate and face stored. Minutes later, sheriff's cruisers swarmed the street, lights flashing red and blue across the quiet neighborhood. Deputies rushed to Marcus's porch, weapons drawn, eyes wide at the shredded door and shattered silence. Marcus lowered his weapon, his voice calm. "They came armed this time. You'll have everything you need on the footage." The deputies shook their heads in disbelief as they reviewed the live feeds. "You're lucky you're trained. Most folks wouldn't have lasted a minute against that." Marcus nodded, though his expression stayed hard. "It wasn't luck. It was protocol, and if they come again, I'll be ready." For hours after, the street buzzed with flashing lights, reports being taken, evidence marked. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering about the veteran who had stood off armed intruders like it. Was just another day at work. But Marcus didn't bask in the attention. He stood on his porch, arms crossed, eyes scanning the dark horizon. He knew criminals like that weren't random. They had a motive, a target, and now a bruised pride. Whether they returned or not, Marcus had already made his choice. He wasn't backing down. Not yesterday, not today, not ever. And as dawn broke once again over the neighborhood, Marcus felt the same calm resolve that had carried him through deserts and jungles overseas. The battle had changed locations, but the principle was the same: stand your ground, protect what's yours, and never surrender to fear. He whispered to himself, a phrase he'd carried since his army days: "Protocol keeps you alive. Discipline wins the fight." The streets grew quiet again, but Marcus remained alert, ready for whatever came next. Because as long as men like those prowled in shadows, he knew peace was never permanent, but he was prepared always.